If you want to see your name at the beginning of all of our videos, as well as see exclusive content here on the homestead, please feel free to join our Patreon. Memberships start off at just $1 a month. And as always, thank you for your support.
You can ferment almost any livestock feed. I even know people who ferment their dog. Go back, watch OP's original video. She has some really great tips. When it comes to fermenting feed, I absolutely love the fermenting the feed of my chickens, quails, and ducks. But in case any of my normal followers who raise rabbits see this, do not ferment your rabbit feed. And for some people, that's going to be like, oh yeah, that's obvious. But a lot of people don't know that rabbits have very delicate immune systems. And they can build up gas in their gut, and that fermented feed can lead to bloat. With that being said, I do know of some friends who they've raised rabbits, and especially during the winter time, they will add warm water to their feed to create a mash. And that's not necessarily a problem. Again, the problem is in the fermentation process when we do build up those gases. This is the line breeding chart that I prefer to follow if I'm doing a very heavy line breeding. The idea of this is you only have a breeding pair, a male and a female, in which you are going to have your first generation A. And first generation A, let's say you keep a buck and a doe out of that generation. You breed the son back to the mother and the father back to the daughter, getting you generation B and C. From those, again, you would decide to keep a buck and a doe. You can rebreed them back to their parent/grandparent. Basically, you just follow that line down, down, down. You can cross the lines, uncross the lines, with those coefficients to keep them below 90%. The trick with this is you could either take the babies out of these and outcross them to a completely different line, create a new line that you can use as an outcross later, or you can completely isolate this group to use as an outcross for another line later down the road. What I do is I treat it as a trio. So I have the male, which I'm breeding to the female in this chart, and I have the male I'm breeding to another female in the same way. Normally when I get down to generation D, E, F, I'll take my lines and cross them to create a third line that I can isolate. Because they're all related through that buck, but they're not related through the female line. And through the random female line, what I'll do is I will get an unrelated buck. When I say unrelated, it's kind of like a generality. Like they're cousins, but it's far enough removed to where they might as well not be cousins. Coefficients are going to be very low. I got a lot of questions about Mr. Meatloaf right here in that, was he a Champagne Day Argent or a Day Argent breed? And no, Mr. Fat Man here is just a very overly silvered silver fox. Both Champagne Day Argents and silver foxes share the silvering gene. Silver foxes carry gene 1 and gene 2, whereas Champagne Day Argents carry gene 3. Now, not much is really known about the silvering gene in that I cannot look at Mr. Meatloaf here and be like, oh yeah, he has 2 silver gene 2s. He might have gene 1 and gene 2. Which is why sometimes when you breed 2 overly silvered silver fox together, they produce an under-silvered silver fox. If I had Moose here, I would show you a gene 3, which is just basically completely silvered out, except for the very bit around the muzzle and the feet. Here is Vanessa chilling with her babies. I would say that she is under-silvered, and I'm hoping to pair her with Meatloaf in the future, compared to Lalo, who is more correctly silvered. Many times when we look at the setup of our rabbitry when it comes to different breeders, there are a few things that we take into consideration. What is most efficient? What can we afford? And what do we prefer? I've said it a million times in that there are so many different ways that you can raise rabbits. There are so many different setups and feed options, feeder options, and water bottles, and a lot of it comes down to personal preference. I use wire cages because they are the best option when it comes to cleanliness, carcass quality, and herd management. I have various kinds of catch pans that are easy to pull out and have waste disposed of. But when you're really thinking about raising rabbits, what I suggest is to think about the future and what is going to be easiest for you. Think about sanitation, waste management, and feeding schedules. Do you need a barn with air conditioning or heat, depending on how hot and cold your summers and winters get? How many rabbits do you want to have and how many can you afford? How many breeder cages do you need versus grow-out cages do you need? Do you want cages like these that are collapsible and can be put into storage easy? Or do you want something a little more sturdy that will last forever? There's a lot to think about, and I would love to hear from my other breeder friends what they prefer when it comes to setup and what they wish that they knew before they got started. If I have an aggressive doe with a buck, there are a few things I will try. First, I will try table breeding. This allows me to step in and do what is needed to ensure that the does don't hurt my buck. There's also making sure that your doe is physically and mentally ready for a breeding. You can try switching the doe's cage with the buck or taking the doe for a car ride. But in the long run, I don't like to have aggressive does in my breeding program. It's just more pain than it's worth to have them. That is feed and cage space going into an animal that can cause damage to one of my other rabbits. How do we keep rodents in check? For one, we keep all of our food in a metal trash can put away so that there isn't any extra to be left out to feed the mice. We also keep various kinds of rodent traps. We have sticky traps, snap traps, some old-fashioned oil traps, basically anything that isn't poison, because I don't want my other animals to get into the poison and get sick. We also sweep the barn and dump pans often so that there aren't any scraps. And if all else fails, I have this guy who is better than any cat I have ever owned when it comes to finding and getting rid of mice. This may get me some heat, but there is no such thing as a rabbit-proof room. Even if you have a bare room, just walls, floor, molding, that rabbit can find something to chew on. And when it comes to rabbits, or any animal really, any kind of blockage or foreign material blockage is hell to deal with. There's nothing necessarily wrong with free roaming, but if you are going to do it, it always has to be under supervision. When the rabbit isn't under supervision, they should be kept in a safe cage. Now, if you prefer a solid bottom cage over a wire bottom cage, that's your prerogative. You just want a safe spot. Because given the chance, the rabbits will chew the walls, they'll chew closet doors, they'll chew molding. I've even seen rabbits go after those little door stops on the walls. So with how chaotic these little creatures are when it comes to chewing, that is my advice. How versatile is rabbit meat? If you have any recipe that calls for chicken, you can exchange it for rabbit. Rabbit is very similar in taste and texture to chicken, and cooks about the same. But just like chicken, you have to worry about it getting too dry if you cook it too hot for too long. Low and slow is the key to rabbit. You can definitely improve lynx type by using black, but I will say it's a lot easier if you have a rabbit that carries chocolate. And what that does is it allows you to skip the step of creating a chocolate carrier to then have to rebreed it back to the lynx to get that color again. If I'm trying to improve type of my lynx, I prefer to breed them to a chocolate-based rabbit. So for instance, I just bred Lulu to a lilac buck. The lynx over the lilac is dominant, so I'll still retain that agouti ring color, but because they are both lilac base, being a chocolate dilute, I'm more likely to get the color that I want than if I were to just breed Lulu to strawberry, for instance. Because strawberry, from my knowledge, is not a chocolate carrier. So what I would need to do is I would need to take the babies out of Lulu and strawberry and breed them back to Lulu. But both ways are totally valid. But just like with any kind of agouti color, you want to be very careful about your ring colors and that they don't get too smutty. When talking to other agouti breeders, I've always heard once you get type down, you want to breed those colors back to each other. So you would just want to breed lynx to lynx if possible. So this big pouch of skin right here under my doe's neck is called a dewlap. And it's not necessarily an indicator on whether or not my does are pregnant or if they've ever had babies. So we know Sadie, she's had babies before. Lulu has never had babies, she has a dewlap. Rex is a junior doe, doesn't have a dewlap. In a doe, dewlap formation just has to do with age and hormones, and sometimes how fat they are can also determine the size of dewlap. But what the does kind of use it for is when they are nesting, they will pull fur from the skin area to line their nests. So for instance, Lizifer here has been pulling fur from her dewlap all morning. This will be her first litter, and as you can see, she has a smaller dewlap, but she also had that dewlap before she was even pregnant. I don't have oats for you, baby. I currently have 3 active breeds within my barn. I have my mini Rex, and out of my mini Rex, I have my casters, my broken casters, lynx, my broken black, my lilacs, and my blue-eyed white program. I also have silver foxes, in which I currently have blacks and blues, but we're working on getting chocolates and lilacs as well. I then also have my standard Rexes. Of these, I have my otters and my chinchillas. And then we'll say I have an inactive breed. I currently have a champagne buck and whatever the heck Cookie is. Cookie, the wannabe champagne silver fox. But she's a pretty little girl with great type. I'd show you Moose right now, but he is currently hanging out with some girlfriends. So you are right, there are plenty of other foods that you can eat that aren't domesticated rabbits. But originally, that is what rabbits were domesticated for. They were domesticated for meat. It's only the past 100 years or so that rabbits have become beloved pets. And when it comes to raising other foods, I can't raise a lot of other foods. I don't have the space. I don't know if you can hear my ducks or not. I can raise ducks, I can raise chickens, I can raise quail. But those don't have the turnaround that rabbit does. Rabbits are faster breeders, they have larger litters, they don't need incubation. If the world goes to shit, rabbits are the perfect little animal to keep for meat. Not to mention their meat to bone to feed ratio is outstanding. And when we're talking about saving the world and doing what you can within your means, this is a really sustainable meat source. And a lot more people would go less hungry if they had the ability to raise rabbits. Just wanted to take some time to show off the new babies here on the homestead. We have 7 new little wigglies, and they are doing fantastic. Mom is a first-time mom, so I'm just doing all of my checks and making sure everything is okay. But she's currently chewing on my sleeve looking for some oats. And I know that we should never have favorites when they're this young, but I'm pretty sure this is a lilac kit. If not, it's definitely a blue. I won't know for sure until they are a few days older, but this is probably my favorite. Mom's milk still hasn't come in yet. This is day 2, so I'll continue to keep an eye on them. But I do have a doe in milk if I do need to foster out. But yeah, we got some wiggly babies. You are looking at getting into purebred rabbits, whether that be for your own meat consumption or show. How do you build that barn? How do you start off with a great foundation? The first 2 things I suggest is to learn your breed's SOP. What makes a good rabbit in your breed? What are the rules that dictate whether or not it's showable? What makes it a good rabbit compared to a great rabbit? Next, I suggest finding a mentor within your breed. Find someone who knows what they're talking about, who has been in that breed for a while, who can help kind of guide you in what is a good quality rabbit versus a bad quality rabbit, and where you can find good stock. It's also great if this mentor is close to you or is in the same show circuit as you, so you can take them with you to buy rabbits. But at least have somebody who is willing to look at confirmation photos of rabbits you are looking to buy, who can be like, okay, here are the problems I see, here are the benefits for building your program. And finally, try to buy the best quality that you can afford. Most great quality rabbits are going to be pretty expensive. There is a huge difference between the trio I got for $30 in my Rex rabbits. Gosh darn it, I wanted chinchilla colors. Because that line has some huge problems that I am fixing. and my otter does, which started at $50 a piece. And even then, they are on the cheap side. I was looking at a lilac buck at my last show that was for sale. He was a grand champion. He was gorgeous. I wanted him bad. He was sitting at about $200. I wanted that buck. He was gorgeous. I couldn't afford him at the time. But boy, do I wish I would have been able to afford him. But again, I get what I can afford at the best quality possible. And sometimes if you find the right mentor, they will help you in a lot of ways. They can help you network for decently priced stock that are brood or cull just based on very small things that are easily bred away from. Or you can be extremely lucky and get a mentor who will give you a breeding trio or give you a breeding pair under conditions. Or if you're extra lucky, you can be like me and my friend group. One of us will get an amazing buck who we kind of play stud fee for, and we'll play trade-a-kit. Find your people and network. It can be so beneficial when breeding rabbits. I have 2 pet rabbits, both of which are litter trained. When it comes to litter training, you want to start in a cage. Start in a smaller space to give them the idea of where it is safe and where they should go to the bathroom. You're going to want to put that litter pan in a corner, and in the same corner, you're going to want to put their food and water. I prefer water bottles and J feeders so that they are sitting in the litter pan to eat and drink, but it's not being contaminated by the litter box. If the rabbit still isn't getting the idea, you can take pieces of their fecal matter and put it into the litter box, and they will eventually get it. Now, with that being said, if you are letting your rabbit out into larger spaces, you're going to have a more difficult time litter training. Start small and then expand that space.
Fly strike is one of those things that absolutely terrifies me in the summer, so I'm very careful about the flies in the barn, especially during the summer when they're at their worst. So one of the easiest ways to mitigate flies is through waste management, making sure that your fecal matter and your urine is appropriately taken care of. I'm also a lot more anal retentive about wiping the barn down in general with a disinfectant solution. In the barn, I'll have fly traps, like the sticky ribbons hanging from the ceiling, and then outside the barn, I do more like a bucket trap. So it's a mixture of waste management and traps. And it actually works pretty well in the summer.
The broken pattern when it comes to rabbit genetics is going to be dominant over a solid pattern. So basically, one of the rabbits has to be a broken to pass the gene on. So for instance, this litter's dad was a broken tricolor, which is basically a broken harlequin. And you can see with this litter, we have 2 solids and then the rest are broken babies. In raising rabbits, part of herd management is deciding when you should rebreed your does. And there are a lot of questions and answers that you kind of have to throw around that come down to personal preference. One question can be, how heavy do you want your breeding cycles to be? If you're on a heavy schedule, then you would breed the doe within a week of her giving birth. If you're on a more moderate cycle, you want to breed the kits any time after they are 4 weeks old. If you are on a lighter schedule and your doe only needs to have 1 or 2 litters a year, then you would want to do it past 8 weeks old or even further. But beyond scheduling, one of the biggest things we want to look at is the condition of mom. Has she kept weight and is she in a good condition? Does she still have nice flesh over the top line? Are her kits growing at an appropriate rate? All of these questions are important when it comes to breeding your rabbit. Vanessa's kits in here are about 4 weeks old, and I rebred her to Zeus today. So I'll wean these kits around 8 weeks of age, and by the time I have all the babies out of here, she'll have a nest box and expect another litter. I'm able to do this because she is of good condition still, and she has another 4 weeks to put on more weight or retain more weight as we move forward. And the reason I say it that way is the kits drink more milk and rely more on mom in the first 4 weeks than the last 4 weeks. In some commercial settings, you'll actually see where they'll start weaning the mom when the kits are 4 weeks. I personally don't like to do that. I like to have the kits on mom for at least 7 weeks, but preferably closer to 8. But some of that, other than breeding cycle, does have to do with the attitude of mom towards kits. I would rather take kits slightly early from mom than have mom hurt them, because some does honestly get sick of their kids and don't want them around them anymore. But overall, Vanessa's actually a really great mom. It is day 2 of having these little babies, and this is where we should start seeing mom's milk come in. So as you start going through the litter and looking at babies, you should start seeing that they have full bellies. So these guys do have slight bellies. They don't have huge bellies yet, meaning that mom has got her milk in, but it's not fully in yet, or the babies just aren't getting good feeds yet. But they aren't completely wrinkly on the sides either. But again, we're just going to continue monitoring the babies and getting our weights 2 times a day to make sure everybody is starting to get milk and getting fed.